Oh hey, it's Wes, and today I'm excited to talk about the new, soon-to-be released Viltrox 24 1.8 for full frame. Why is this exciting? Well, quite some time ago, Viltrox came out with their 85 1.8 for full frame, and since then they've kind of still been playing around with APS-C lenses like this, the 23 1.4, which was decent. I liked it, but not as much as I liked the 85 1.8. This is a fantastic third-party lens from Viltrox. If you want to know more about that, check out my review of that video. Since then, a Mark II came out of that. And another promising thing about this is that the 85 is still getting firmware updates to this day. It's a great lens, great value, but we're not here to talk about the 85, we're here to talk about the new 24. So let's jump into it with the categories and build quality. So the build of this lens is very similar and very familiar with the 23 1.4, as I mentioned before. If we look at these two, we've got the aperture ring in the back, we've got the focus ring in the front. Focus rings feel about the same. The aperture rings, not quite the same. I have a problem with the aperture ring on this one here. On the 24 1.8, it is very, I don't want to say loose, but it's not well dampened. It has kind of a cheap sound to it. And it's pretty easy to bump out of auto mode. Now, not as easy on the 20 as it is on the 23, because that one just pops right out of auto. But it's better dampened and sounds better on the 23, so that's unfortunate here. But overall, this is a full metal construction. And if we open up and look on the back here, we are going to see there is no weather sealing gasket. That is unfortunate, but we have the very interesting USB port on this. Now on the 85, as this came out a while back, it was a USB Type B micro. And also on the 23, we had a Type B micro. But since this is a newer lens, we have finally moved up to a USB-C port, which is good, but since it's different from all the other lenses, that can be a bit confusing. The lens hood on this is not the same, unfortunately, as the stellar lens hood on the 23 1.4, which is mostly metal, snaps on real well. Oh, and if you haven't seen my review of the 23, it's up here. This one is plastic. Doesn't snap on quite as nicely and fits very closely around the lens cap, which is not as nice as one might think, because, you know, close design tolerances are nice. It makes it harder to get the lens cap in and easy to accidentally pull the lens cap off when you're moving the lens hood. It also makes it harder to put the lens hood back on in reverse. So that doesn't work as easily there. So lens hood, not so great. Overall build quality though is solid. It is metal. It is tough. I gotta give this an 8 out of 10. Moving on to the handling. As you can see, this is a very small lens. This is even smaller and lighter than Sony's 24 1.4. which I also reviewed. So this is super handy when it's on your camera. Let's have a look here. This is a great little package. Look at this cute little lens. So it's a great size for Sony mirrorless bodies, very convenient. It's mostly back balanced, which is good, but it's just a little bit heavier than you might expect. I'm not saying it's heavy, but it looks very small and cute. But it does have a little bit of weight to it. Unlike the 24 1.4 G Master from Sony, which I found was a lot lighter than you expected it to be. But overall, very easy to use. You've got the aperture ring on here for those who are big on that. The only issue is that it's pretty easy to bump the aperture ring out of auto. I really like the design from Sigma where there's a lock on it, or the newer GM lenses from Sony where you really got a wrench on it to get it out of auto. There is a click there, but it's not that strong. So I'm gonna give that a 9 out of 10 for handling. Image quality, and that's what we're here to find out, isn't it? So overall, if we had to make a scale of image quality here, super impressive with the 85, pretty good with the 23. This is somewhere in the middle. So let's talk about that. It is very sharp, especially for a third-party lens. Wide open, not the sharpest. Overall, it's definitely not the sharpest. But this is a cheap lens, but we'll talk about value a little bit later. Contrast is good, but not great. Definitely not great. And it will wash out with a lot of backlighting and so forth. Chromatic Aberration, again, not great, but also not bad. This is a very middle-of-the-road lens. Even when you stop it down, Chromatic Aberration can still appear sometimes. But if you stop it down just a little, it is still a very sharp lens, very impressive results, especially for the forthcoming price point for an autofocus full-frame lens. The biggest downside of this is there is quite a bit of distortion with this lens. Not shocking, since this is a generally wide-angle lens, and even Sony's 24GM experiences a fair amount of distortion. But this is a little bit harder to correct because you're less likely to encounter manufacturer lens profiles for this less popular lens from a smaller manufacturer. So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 for image quality. Overall, I am very pleased with it. Looks great. And just so you know, there will be a link in the description with a lot more image samples than you're seeing in this video and higher quality image samples, so you can see those demos down there. There will also be purchase links in the description. If you like what you're seeing, you can buy it through my affiliate links to help support this channel and feed my fat cats. So next up is image character. And so for that, we're talking about kind of the intangibles, the things that are very subjective. And so for this, the bokeh is mostly nice. 24mm lens, you don't play with bokeh as much, but you certainly can. Looks great. Backgrounds can get just a tiny bit nervous. The aperture blades are pretty smooth though. Not a lot of 3D pop, if that's a thing to you. To me, it is a little bit. But again, at a 24mm, that is hard to achieve. Wouldn't expect that a lot. Has some decent, interesting lens flares, so that's a plus. The sun stars are not super uniform, kind of crazy, which can be fun too. So overall, it has a pretty decent character. Nothing too bad, nothing too amazing. That's going to be another 7 out of 10. Autofocus, and this is where I was quite pleased. I filmed multiple YouTube videos and live streams and Zoom calls with this lens. It is very reliable for video autofocus. Additionally, for photo autofocus, it is also fast and reliable. I have been quite impressed by it. Now, is it as fast and reliable as, say, the 24GM or a native lens? With a direct drive motor? No, it is not. Not quite as fast, makes a little bit of noise. And when you're using the more advanced focus features like eye autofocus, face autofocus, real-time AF tracking, you have to be just a little bit closer. It doesn't work quite as well, and so you lose a little bit there for the autofocus. Overall, very reliable though, especially with the basic autofocus functions of just attaining and achieving sharp focus, so I gotta give that an 8 out of 10. Value. And that is where we're expecting something from Viltrox, because they always show up for value. So the 24 1.8 comes in at $400, $399. That is a strong price point for a full frame wide aperture lens. Similar to that, well, there's not a lot to choose from, and this is why when I rated the Sony 24G Master, I had to give it a high score, because there are not a lot of options for autofocus 24mm lenses on Sony. So you got the 20mm G lens, it's $900, not the same thing. The 24 1.4 GM, it's $1,400. That is more than 3 times the price of this. Now if you stretch out a little further, you've got the Sigma, which is sort of a quasi-adapted lens, the art lens for $850 at 1.4. Sony 28 f2 for $450, close to the price, a little bit off the focal length, a little bit off the aperture. You got the Batis 25 f2, very close, $1,300, more than 3 times as much again. Then you have 2.8 options from Tamron and Samyang for $250 and $400. A 2.8 is hardly comparable. Although they are decent lenses, it still doesn't give you nearly as much light. So overall, I have to give this a 10 out of 10 for value. Nothing really compares to it right now. And that's not surprising. It's a Viltrox lens. They know how to make autofocus lenses for a good price. So overall, that gives us a score of 49 out of 60. That is a very high score. Also, if you want to check out my overall scores of all the lenses and cameras I've tested, I've got a spreadsheet link down in the description below. See how that stacks up against everything. Constantly adding new things in there, and sometimes I go back and tweak the scores because the status of the lens and how it compares to the entire field of options does change over time, and I've been doing this for a few years now. Tell me what you think about this lens. If you had a look at the image samples, let me know down in the comments below. I'm always hanging out down there. I'd love to hear what you think about it. And if you want to pick up one of these again, I've got links in the description to help support this channel and feed my cat. So until next time, let's go take some photos.